Welcome to Black Girls Diagnosed. Today we have a very special guest, Cheryl A. Poe. She's a founder and executive director of Advocating for Kids, Inc. Cheryl is a nationally recognized special education advocate and the visionary behind the Advocating Why Black movement. Thank you, Cheryl, for joining me today. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, which I haven't introduced to everyone?
Yes, thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I'm so excited to
You're
speak with
so
you and your
welcome.
audience. Yes, I identify as a neurodivergent. One of the things that I think it's really important to share is yes, I grew up with an IEP, so I understand and can relate to what that's like, what
Mhm.
that lived experience is like as a Black female neurodivergent in a predominantly white space, because that's where I grew up. So with that experience, as I got older and I had children, and my first son had signs of having some disabilities, signs of autism, had tactile defensiveness, and some of the other early milestones were missed around speech and talking. I attempted to get him services, and the experience of that, right? The experience of what it's like to be in a space advocating for your son to get the required special education services that will allow them to be successful in life was traumatic. I, at the time, which had just like finished my master's degree in urban education and was still in school for some post-grad work to become a licensed therapist. So I understood and had a more than usual understanding and access to resources around disabilities or impairments. So I was able to articulate what need to be said at those meetings to get the services, the related services, the speech, and it didn't matter. It I experienced it from walking into a system that you're told when you read about it is supposed to be there to help you identify supports for your child within this system, within the IEP team, working collaboratively. And that's not the truth when you're Black. Instead,
Yeah.
I was met with microaggressions and racism and a belief that, oh, he's a Black child, so he's just, disposable. We don't need to invest these extra services that the white counterparts get. And I fought it. I will admit I was mad and hurt at first. I'm not, right? But I used that anger, I think, in a way to learn as much as I could and fight for my children. Both of them ended up needing supports. But it worked because they graduated. One graduated with honors. They both had opportunities to go to college and be independent and really kind of develop into, young men that I'm very proud of, even with whatever limitations they may have had. I feel that they learned enough to cope within a society that is not going to be very kind to them just because of their skin color. And then when you add their neural divergence, that's a whole nother piece. So I do this work out of a passion, a love, a need, a love of my community, and the realization of we cannot trust white systems around special education. Like I'm talking about outside systems and organizations to care about our children as much as we do. So
Yeah,
for
and
me, it
it's
was two lessons learned in this process.
so all of this that you have experienced is with yourself and with your children, is this what inspired you to create and found Advocating Why Black Movement?
That, yeah, it is exactly because I think it's not think I know that when I first started this process, I felt it was about assimilation, that that's the way you found out how to get the information that you needed. And when I say assimilation, that means, um, going into all predominantly white spaces to learn about sped ed, to learn about advocacy, believing that the pushed white narrative about advocacy was the only way to do it to be successful. And I found that to be not the truth. I found those white spaces very as racist as the IEP team
Yes,
members,
they are. They're not.
right?
Yeah.
And I was
A
like,
lot of
damn,
white
this is
autistic spaces are not safe for Black autistic people, let alone
yes.
a Black autistic parent trying to come in just for some support of their children. I've said this. I'm like, Black autistic people, Black parents of Black autistic children are not safe in white autistic spaces, and
Yeah.
we can't like express that enough.
And thank you for saying that over and over because that's what I had to learn. I've been doing this. My oldest is now 30, so I've been doing this before Black girl diagnosed, right? Before autism and Black, that it didn't exist. And then as I'd say over the last 5 or so years, noticing like literally finding other Black advocates or special education attorneys or speech pathologists, like, and realizing, okay, we're out here and we need safe spaces. And so when an opportunity came up for me to work with Howard University to do a research project about what it's like advocating while Black. I mean, it is a whole experience. I jumped at it. I was like, "Hey, nobody else is looking at that." And interesting, in the state of Virginia, we're based out of the state of Virginia. We provide services nationally, but in our state of Virginia, especially, the racism is so disgusting that even our organizations that the states pay for, like it's one called the Parent Education PTSI, Parent Education Advocacy Training Center, they get tons of money from our Virginia Department of Ed and from other people to train parents, right? It's a requirement to be a parent resource, but it is so anti-Black, it's disgusting. They actually spend and have dedicated funding for Hispanic or English as a second language people, right? Like training programs specifically about that culture, but they
Yeah,
have nothing for Blacks,
you see that a lot.
nothing.
You
And
see
then
that.
when I confronted the executive director about it, she got mad at me. But
It's
you
like
know,
that with a lot of, um, you know, um, undocumented immigrants, and I don't want to use the wrong terminology. It's just
right, right.
morning, but they have like home first owner programs for them, and they give them a lot of resources. And these are like people who newly came here, but like I'm like, what about the Black people that are here already that need these resources? Why
Amen
are
to
the
that.
Black people that need these resources already being left behind? But something I wanted to ask was that, you're an expert in 504, and so for
Mhm.
parents who
All of it.
may be overwhelmed,
Mhm.
can you break down IDEA, Section
Yes,
504, and the
I will.
ADA in simple terms?
I will do my best. They don't
Okay,
make it easy, but I'll do my best.
it's
So
so
let's just start
important.
with just saying it's a law, right?
Yes. It's important for families to know their rights when advocating for children, and I feel like you can help them understand better what their rights are for their children.
Yes. So it is a law. It is a true law. It's a regulation and a law and a statute. And you want me to do 504 first or IDA, or does it matter?
It's up to you.
Okay, we'll do IDA because it's a little bit bigger and longer. So that stands for the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, right? And that is the federal law that states that you have to provide a child that has been identified with a disability under the categories within your state with something that's called a free and appropriate public education. And the focus, that free and appropriate public education, and a lot of the parents may have heard the term in an IEP meeting, FAPE,
Hmm.
FAPE. An IEP is developed, and that is your individual education plan. And the purpose of that plan is to identify both your child's strengths and weaknesses that are related to the disability that falls under the category that they were identified. So if you're ADHD, which I am, I would fall under OHI as an IDEA category, right? So my IEP plan would then talk about how my ADHD gets in the way of me being able to access and benefit from the general education curriculum. So like a non-neural divergent student, I have to be able to access opportunity to learn equal to them. So with that, I may need some additional supports. So your IEP has a present level of performance that talks about all your areas of strengths, weaknesses, your social needs, behavioral needs, communication needs. All of those pieces need to be addressed. And then you can develop what's called IEP goals. Now, your IEP goals are what your direct instruction is. That's your specialized instruction from a special education teacher, right? A general education teacher cannot provide special education services. It has to be a special education teacher, and they're working on those goals to help remediate or compensate or strengthen the weaknesses that were identified based on all the data that was collected. Okay.
Yes.
So that's one of the key big differences from IDEA to 504 is that you have IEP goals. In addition to IEP goals on an IEP plan, you also have accommodations that or modifications. And accommodations are things like, what support does a child need to show the educator that they understand the concepts that are being taught, right? So, say I have a kid who's extremely bright, dyslexic, can't read on grade level. However, if he has a read out loud opportunity to hear the content, like a book, if somebody's reading the book to him, if people are reading instructions, people are reading the content that he needs or he or she needs, that individual maybe not in a reading class but in a science class can then function because they have the ability to understand the concepts. It's just they get jumbled around if they have dyslexia. So we're not giving that child an advantage, we're giving the child an opportunity to show what they know. That's what accommodations and modifications do. So
Yeah.
that's on your IEP, but that's also on your 504. And then you have something called related services, right? That's if you need speech therapy, if your child is on the spectrum and they need help with pragmatics or they need help with receptive, expressive, or articulation or fluency, perspective taking, those kinds of weaknesses may need a specialty person, which is your speech pathologist, and that's considered a related service. That also can go on your IEP. A lot of people don't realize that you can also request related services under Section 504. You do have that right, that language is in there.
Thank
So
you for
y'all
sharing
don't
that.
be scared to go to that 504 meeting and say, I need an OT, a speech, and an assistive technology evaluation to identify additional accommodations that can help my child. But the difference, so I think and then you have something called least restrictive environment. The least restrictive environment is extremely important, and this is something that Black families, especially Black boys, are really overrepresented in more restrictive environments. And those are environments where they are removed from having any interaction with general education teachers or general education students. They're put in self-contained classes of some sort. I'll use emotional disturbance, ED, because we're always overrepresented in ED instead of saying, oh, maybe it's autism. Right? You
Okay.
know, I had a case I just worked on where they had this little girl had selective mutism, all the signs of autism. They labeled her ED. We fixed that, right? Because it's the misdiagnosing of Black children is one of the biggest concerns, and one of the reasons why I do this work. But your least restrictive environment means that you should be able to start, like they should be looking at it and discussing with the parent, what supports do you need for your child to stay in a general education setting, maybe with a special education teacher. Some states call it co-taught, some states call it inclusion, but it's when you have a general education teacher and a special education teacher. So maybe your child does need a little bit extra support than just some accommodations in the general ed. They need to have it also with the special education teacher. So that's another prong. And then there's one underneath it about being in your resource class where you don't have any exposure to your general education students, except for maybe, and that's not in all cases, in specials or lunch or PE or something like that. So those are the components, the specific components of IDEA that fall under an IEP that are all used to ensure that the child gets a free and appropriate education and meets the purpose of IDEA. I find understanding the purpose of IDEA, which is ensuring your child has specially designed instruction and related services that meet their unique needs so that they can, right, access the general education curriculum, prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. So one of the things that I always tell parents you can do that's real simple, if you have an IEP goal, or if there's something on your child's IEP and it doesn't make sense, just ask this question. Explain to me how this meets my child's unique needs. And just don't say anything and let them explain it to you.
Yeah,
And
that's
if they
really
can't explain it, then there's an issue.
it's always important to like advocate for your child, and thank you for explaining that in a way, because I know a lot of times, the parents just aren't sure what they're allowed to ask, and they're not sure what the boundaries are. So thank you so much for explaining it that way. And hopefully people can take that advice and learn and advocate better for their child. And another thing is that we know that Black children with disabilities are often criminalized and disciplined
It's
way
everything.
worse than all other children. So can you talk about the harmful effects of these practices?
Oh,
What
it's
schools should be doing differently?
Ah, it is terrible. It's actually this, I think it's criminal. It should be criminal because it is this idea, this notion still that, black kids, especially black boys, are somehow predators or somehow
Yeah.
just so much worse than anybody else, or black kids overall. And that's a myth. That is a white supremacist myth that has seeped in and remains in our educational system when it comes to developing policies such as zero tolerance. So you're fighting that whether you have a disability or not, right? Then you add the disability on it. The reality of it is you do have a little bit, you have some protections, right? But what school districts will do is they'll do things like call a parent up and say, you need to come get your child because they're doing something, whatever the school deems that they think is inappropriate, that the child has to be removed from education. And they'll do that and then they'll not document it. And in
Mm.
that way they're covering their own behinds, because instead of having to list suspensions, because people do sometimes try and look at those disproportionalities to say there's something wrong with the school district and they need to make a change. So the first issue is that they'll hide it and deny doing it correctly. But what that does to harm the child is that you're removing the student from an educational opportunity. If they aren't in that classroom, they are not learning equal to their peers. And if they have an IEP, we know they may have behaviors that will break your code of conduct. So, what did you put in place to prevent that? Right? So it is quick to remove our kids out of the school, whether it's just straight up, I'm going to suspend your child, suspend your child, suspend your child, make a recommendation for your child to go to an alternative setting, or I'm going to sneak it, I'm going to call you and tell you to come pick up your child, and your child misses what they're in school, maybe a week because you've been told not to bring them back, then your child's not learning. They're not looking at the whole
Yeah.
picture, right?
And
They're
that's
literally criminalizing the disability.
Yeah, that like Black children don't get the grace that white children get, and I have like personal experience with that. When I was going into the high school, they were actually putting me into alternative school, but they didn't inform my parents. It was just like we got to the school I was supposed to be at, and it was like, no, she's in alternative school. This is pre-diagnosis, but people knew that I had challenges. But
Right.
instead of like directly expressing the challenges, they were just like, okay, well, we're just gonna put her in an alternative school. But it's just the way that the system works and the way the system continuously fails Black children. It's mind
Like
to me, and I just
and
don't.
black families, because
And
they
it,
lie. I mean, right? They
yeah,
probably lied to you, lied to you, lied to your mama, and they broke the law, right? And because there's this other piece of the law that says they're supposed to do child fine. So that means if a child is struggling in school, let's not just assume it's because they're black and they don't know how to behave. Let's look at evaluating the child. Let's dig into what is going on with this. Have you had a conversation with the child? Have you had a conversation with the family? Even if you don't want to, because some of our black families, they hear sped ed and they want to run. I want
yeah,
to say to black families, if your child needs help, it makes more sense to get your child help and evaluate it than have your child going into the school to prison pipeline. And the
yeah,
school district has
exactly.
an obligation to find your child that needs that help and give it to them.
Yes, that's perfectly said. And
Mhm,
something I can really appreciate is that your work blends grassroots advocacy,
mhm.
research, and policy reform, which is important to approach advocacy from all these levels. And how can families build power together to demand real change?
Oh, we need to come together and start acknowledging, accepting, and be representative of like people that we are Black people that either have a neurodivergent, have a disability, and so do our children. And guess what? We're okay. We're still PhDs. We still have degrees. We run companies. We're teachers. We're educators. Having a disability does not stop you from being able to do things that you dream of doing. You just may have to go about it a lot differently, but it can be done. That's number one. The
Yes.
other two is find community, find people that look like you, and not only look like you, but also believe in your core beliefs around disabilities and around the idea that yes, you have a right to have a voice at that table. Because let me be clear, not all kinfolk are skinfolk, and I'm in a case right now where the district's all Black, and they're okay with this fourth grade little Black boy reading on a second grade level, and I don't understand that because I'm like you. This could be your son, your grandson, your godchild. How are you okay with this? Why does this family have to pay me to come in to let you all know you need to give them better reading instruction because you're the one that collected the data to say he can't read, right? So
Right. Makes
we
no
need
sense.
parents that aren't scared to confront teams, even if the team looks like us.
That's true. That's very
Um,
true.
right?
Because there are a lot of situations and issues that we ourselves as Black people who are autistic and are in this space that we do need to work out with each other, and then it'll just be easier when
Right.
we have to bring it to the authority figures, to the white people.
Yep.
But and that
Going
just
to school board meetings, can I throw that in there too? We need to start showing up politically
yeah, I agree.
and going to some school board meetings and talk about how you are being treated, but also how your child's being created in the systems and demand that they address it.
Yeah, and that just brings me into my next question. What does it look like to truly center the voices of Black families in education and advocacy? How can parents get empowered to step into those spaces and have more confidence?
Yes. Well, first of all, come to our website because we're advocating for kids. What are we? www.advkidsinc.org because we do free trainings. We have one coming up this weekend, September 20th, I guess it's the 26th, whatever Saturday is, where it is Black centered focus. This, you are your child's number one advocate. And so my big recommendation, find people that are doing this work, talking to your needs, attend workshops, join communities, develop communities with where you live. If you live somewhere and you know three or four other parents that have children with disabilities, start a small meetup group, right? Find out about the available resources that are out there. We are excited about our Advocating While Black launch. We're actually going to be able to launch the report in October, and I know that we're going to be doing a lot of free webinars about what the research found, what it means, and then training around the pieces that we found in the actual research. Taking that research and saying, okay, this is a framework for advocating while Black trained advocates or trained parents so that they will learn how to navigate a system and the information that they are getting about what those issues are through true quantitative research. That gives our families an opportunity to really change the trajectory from a perspective of being sourced and having the resources and support to get into those systems, to get into those IEP meetings, to go to those school board meetings, to go to the state and say, this is what my child needs. This is the support that I got. This is what's helped me, and we need more of this there.
Yes, thank
So
you.
yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Do you have any recent projects you'd like to share before we wrap things up?
Yeah, I think I already did. I did that quick. Sorry. I got the
Okay, I just wanna make sure you're putting out there what you wanna put out there. Is
Okay.
there one last thing that you want people to know and take away from this interview?
Just continue to support us, like the community. We need to know that you're enjoying hearing our voices. We need to hear feedback that this is what you need, and we need to know that there are people in our community that want to come together, want to build coalitions, want to see this work, want to do this work. So just don't be shy to reach out, right? And ask about information or resources or supports that you need. Start finding your voice. Be confident. Find that confidence. Believe in your child. And if your child is coming home and telling you something, or you have I'll say this is my last thing to say, and this is the best advice that I can give anyone ever. Trust your mama gut or your papa gut. If you're feeling something's not right, you're probably right. I can like say almost 99% a parent will call and say, no, something just doesn't feel right because my child's behavior changed, or something's not happening that's going on. The child might not be able to express it, but you can tell from their behavior and you can feel it. And if you feel it, trust it, right? Trust that. And then once you trust it, start figuring out how to address it,
Thank
right?
thank you so much, Cheryl,
You're
for
welcome.
sharing your powerful story and wisdom with us today. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to Black Girl Diagnosed. Your presence and support means everything. And until next time, take care and keep advocating with love.